There's a moment just before the engine starts where anything is possible. You've programmed the route, you've checked the weather, run the numbers, the aircraft is cold and dark, waiting, and you're about to bring it to life. That sound. The idea that if I learn enough and practice enough, pay attention to the right details, I might understand something real about how these machines work. That's what brought me to flight simulation, not the graphics or the scenery, the systems, the procedures, the satisfaction of doing something correctly because you understood why it was correct. And for a lot of people in this hobby, that chase led them to one name, PMDG. The 737 specifically, the aircraft that's been everywhere, that's carried more passengers than any other. When PMDG announced their version for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, they used a phrase constantly in forum posts, in marketing materials, in responses to customers' questions, rebuilt from the ground up. I want to tell you about what that phrase meant to me, what I hoped it would mean, and what it actually turned out to mean. But first I want to show you something, or rather, you hear something. Well, that's new. The 2020 version didn't sound like that at all. It sounded more like a recording of a 737. This sounds closer to being near one. PMDG brought in a sound engineer with real 737 experience, someone who's been on the ramps, heard these engines spool up 20 feet away, who knows what the APU sounds like when you're standing under the tail versus in the flight deck versus from a distance. They used feedback from actual ground crew for the external engine start sounds, and you can tell. When you're standing on the virtual tarmac during startup, there's a presence to it, a sense of mass and power and mechanical reality, all in 32-bit audio quality. PMDG claims this is the first product to fully utilize spatialized 3D audio in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and I have not found anyone contradicting them. Move your head and the sound moves with it. Walk from the cabin to the cockpit and the engine note shifts from that muffled forward presence to something more distant, more felt than heard. This is arguably the single biggest improvement over the previous version. Someone genuinely gave a damn about this. And the sounds aren't the only thing that they got right. V1 Simulations has done some excellent content testing the failure systems against actual QRH procedures. A real pilot using proper methodology, checking whether PMDG's claims of accuracy actually hold up. And lo and behold, they actually do. When you lose hydraulic systems A, PMDG has modeled it so you get 2 spoilers instead of 4, the specific spoilers that would remain operational on the real aircraft. Manual gear extension affects hydraulic fluid levels because the fluid in the lines returns to the reservoir. It is all modelled, all behaving according to the QRH. This is what PMDG does. This is what they have done for 20 years. The reason PMDG quality became a phrase in the community. Systems depth, procedural accuracy, the confidence that when you learn something in the sim, you have learned something real. Route 2 functionality works now too. You can program your alternate route while you're flying your primary flight plan. The 2020 version didn't have it, but it's now in the sim for 2024. CPDLC is now fully integrated. Ground operations are better too. Based on the Boeing ground handling guide, service vehicles arrive in realistic sequences. Open the forward entry door first and the air stairs come to that door. Open a different door and the sequence changes. It's not flashy by any means, but if you are the kind of person who notices when the catering truck arrives before passengers have deplaned, and arguably PMDG's entire customer base is theoretically exactly that kind of person, it makes the experience feel more considered. On this specific front, they are as good as they say they are. Solid sounds, systems depth verified by real pilots, ground handling that follows the actual manual. This is what $75 can buy you. This is what PMDG is capable of when they care, which makes everything else more frustrating. The cockpit at night, This, they also got right. Universally praised, and I will add myself to that list. The PBR materials handle light beautifully. There's personality scattered throughout, jacket placement, a ship's library with paperwork. You can even put your $30 cup of coffee wherever you like. Anyway, it's the kind of cockpit that you want to spend time in, the kind that rewards looking around, noticing the details, inhabiting the space. So you look around, and then you look up. The overhead panel is different. The textures are noticeably lower resolution compared to what's directly in front of you. It's like someone turned the focus dial slightly to the left. And the cockpit door is worse. The door that you see every time that you look around the flight deck has this flat photographic texture that looks completely wrong against everything else. It looks almost like someone has pasted it on, a high-resolution image stretched across geometry that doesn't quite match it. And when it comes to the cockpit, you still need Fanzo's Worn Cockpit mod to make the textures look somewhat acceptable, like what you would expect when you pay $75. Think about that for one moment and consider what is wrong with that. A free mod made by a community member improving on what PMDG did for $75. Improving. A word that means something was deficient, a gap between what existed and what should have existed. You don't improve something that's already complete. You improve something that fell short, that didn't meet expectations. Fanzo looked at what PMDG did, the premium study level aircraft, and he saw a deficiency. He saw a gap, and he filled it for free. And we celebrated him for that. We should. He's talented and he's generous. But what we should be asking is, why was his work necessary? Why does a $75 product need a community member to finish the work? Yeah, I'm sure they're stretched really thin. And then there's the wheels. I want you to look at these. Really look. They're not round. You can see the polygon edges, the flat sections where the smooth curve should be. It's subtle in some lighting and it's obvious in others, but it is there. They are hexagonal. I thought I was genuinely losing my mind when I first noticed this. I went searching through forums, through other reviews, convinced I was actually imagining things. And I wasn't. $75, the premium developer, the standard bearer for study level quality, and they shipped wheels that don't successfully represent circles. Like, how do you even hold these things together? The sounds, the hydraulics, the fire procedures that work exactly as the QRH says they should. But then you also have hexagonal wheels, overhead textures that need a free mod, a cockpit door that looks like a poster, the low resolution textures scattered around the aircraft. The same company, the same products, the same $75. The only answer I can find is this. Some things mattered more to PMDG and some things didn't. The cabin tells us the same story as the rest of the aircraft. Inconsistency. The Boeing sky interior, that specific shade of blue that anyone who's flown commercial in the last decade will recognize immediately. That curved ceiling, the soft LED wash that makes economy almost bearable. The overhead bins click. In fact, I spent about 15 minutes just clicking them, watching the little latches release, the bins swinging up and down with that satisfying plastic on plastic sound. Click. The window shades have individual scratches, little imperfections that suggest history, that suggests this aircraft has been somewhere, done something, carried actual people. And if you click the lavatory door, you get a sound effect.
Occupied.
Someone is definitely having a rough flight.
Occupied. Occupied.
There's a version of this aircraft where I'm genuinely charmed, where I'm sitting in the back of this virtual 737, watching the light change outside as we descend, appreciating the craft that went into making a space feel like a space. But then you look at the galley, flat textures, not everywhere, but enough that once you've seen them, you can't really stop. The reading light icons above the seats are crisp and detailed as well. The physical lights themselves though, the actual geometry, have muddy, low-resolution textures that look like they've wandered in from a completely different product. The iFly 737 MAX 8 has had a fully modelled cabin for a while now, window shades that move, not just when you click them, but randomly throughout the flight, because passengers fidget, because someone wants to see the wing, because a cabin is a living space full of living people, and iFly understood that. iFly looked at flight simulation cabins and asked, what if this actually felt like being on an aircraft? And then they built that, and PMDG finally did catch up. I'd be fine with that if that catching up was actually complete. But they didn't exceed what iFly did. They didn't even match it. Where are the cabin announcements? Where are the meal service calls and the small touches that transform a tube with seats into an actual experience? They're not there. Where's the dynamic elements? Where's the sense that this cabin is alive, that 160 people are back there living through the flight alongside you? Nothing happens back there that you didn't make happen. It is just a checkbox, a feature on a marketing list, cabin, check, nothing more. And yet, even with all of that, I keep coming back. There's something about flying this aircraft that I haven't talked about yet, something harder to articulate than sounds and textures. The 737 demands your attention in a way few other aircraft do. When you're hand flying the PMDG 737, you feel a weight to it. Every gust of wind that nudges the nose needs a response. Every change in thrust shifts the trim. The aircraft is constantly trying to do something other than what you want, and your job is to correct and guide it. And PMDG has modelled this, the feel of an out-of-trim aircraft, the way it wants to pitch up or dive, the effort it takes to hold it steady when you haven't kept up with the adjustments. This is where the system's depth stops being numbers on a sheet and starts being something you actually feel. And then there's the approach. The runway is ahead, glide slope acquired, airspeed trend bouncing with every gust, and you're doing it yourself, adding a knot, bleeding a knot, feeling the drag increase as you add flaps or drop the landing gear. And when the mains touch, you did that. You held that centerline and managed the energy. You flared at the right moment and greased it, or didn't, but either way, it was yours. That's feeling. That's what PMDG captured. This is where PMDG's obsession with accuracy does pay off. That feeling only works if the physics underneath are honest. If the aircraft doesn't respond like a 737, you're not flying a 737. You're flying a lie that looks like one. But it does respond. It feels nice to fly. The speeds are right. The handling characteristics match what real pilots describe. When I feel the aircraft fighting me because I've let the trim get away from me, that's real behavior. And the new sound design makes it even more convincing. The system's depth makes the procedures I'm learning matter, but it's the flight model that makes it feel like flying. And feeling like flying is the whole reason we do what we do. The act of flying rendered with enough fidelity that my brain stops knowing the difference. The weight and the consequence of a real machine translated into something I can practice, learn, and eventually master. When it works, it is remarkable. The inconsistencies fade into background noise because the foreground is this, the flying. That's the frustration. It's not that PMDG made a bad product, it's that they made an uneven one. But study level is supposed to mean something, not just the systems work. Lots of aircraft have working systems. Study level is supposed to mean more than that. It's supposed to mean completeness. Attention across the whole aircraft, not just parts that show up in screenshots. Confidence that every switch, every gauge, every procedure is considered, that you can trust this. But why then do the circuit breakers not work? None of them, not one. They're there, you can see them, the labels are accurate, the positions are right. Someone clearly referenced the real aircraft when placing them, but they're static. If you're not deep into this hobby, that might seem like a minor issue.
Circuit breakers, how often do you even need them?
Well, the ditching procedure, you're putting the aircraft in the water. You have to pull a specific circuit breaker because if you don't, the gear warning horn screams at you all the way down. PMDG did all of this effort to model failures accurately. They did the hard graft, electrical faults that propagate as they should. You can practice real-world emergencies in this aircraft, but you can't practice managing them. The Phoenix A320 family models them. Yes, it's a different aircraft entirely, but it's essentially the same market. They are competing for the same audience, individuals who seek realism as much as possible. 288 individual circuit breakers, functional, interactive. You can see the effects. You can walk through the abnormal procedures the way that real pilots do. 288. PMDG has 0 and Phoenix charges less. Throughout making this video, throughout my entire journey with this aircraft, I kept returning to the same question. Not how anymore, as I'd made peace with it. Different teams, different priorities, different deadlines. That is how. The question is why? Why was this acceptable? Why did someone look at a study level aircraft with non-functional circuit breakers and think, yes, that's it, that is the one? And the answer is, I think, simpler than I wanted it to be. Who is going to stop them? PMDG said that the textures were finished, so they're finished. PMDG said that the circuit breakers aren't needed, so they're not needed. That's how this works. That's what 20 years of market dominance buys you. There's no need to conform to be better. You have the freedom to decide what better means. If, for example, you don't like the cockpit textures, Danzo fixed them, and PMDG didn't even have to acknowledge there was a problem, right? This is what a monopoly looks like. It's not evil, not mustache-twirling villainy, just indifference. A quiet confidence of a company that knows that you have nowhere else to go. We expect them to earn our trust, but they don't have to. They just have to exist. And we'll keep buying because we love this stupid hobby, because the flight model is so good, because the system's depth is really that remarkable, because PMDG said so. And what are you going to do about it? I can feel frustrated with PMDG. I am frustrated with PMDG. And still feel something when the mains touch and the reversers roar. That's what makes this complicated. If the aircraft was simply bad, I'd ask for a refund and move on. But it's not simply bad, it's inconsistent. And inconsistency is harder to walk away from than a failure, because the good parts keep pulling you back. And that brings me on to the phrase that they kept using, the one that was supposed to explain why this was worth the wait. Rebuilt from the ground up. We waited 13 months for the PMDG 737 to arrive in MSFS 24, and they kept using that specific phrase constantly. In forum posts, in marketing materials, responses to customer questions about why it was taking so long and why we needed to pay again. So I want to talk about what that phrase actually means, because the gap between what it means and what PMDG delivered tells you everything about the relationship that they think they have with you. When you build something from the ground up, you start with nothing. The old foundation is gone. You dig it out, haul it away, and pour new concrete. Whatever problem existed in the previous structure cannot exist in the new one, because the new one isn't built on the old one. That's not just what this term implies, that is what it actually means. The only reason you would say it. If you're improving an existing product, you would say significantly updated. You don't say from the ground up unless you mean from the ground up. The phrase has no other meaning. And PMDG said it time and time again. But if it was rebuilt from the ground up, why does it have the same panel state saving bug as the 2020 version? The feature that saves your cockpit configuration, which switches are on, which frequencies you are tuned into, where you are in the flight, that is still broken. In 2020, it didn't save comm frequencies properly. You'd load your save state and your radios would be wrong. Users reported this, documented it, complained about it for 3.5 years. It still doesn't work. The same behavior, the same bug. The recall function on the system annunciator panel, press it and there's a delay before it even responds. It is still there. The turbulence wobble, the specific way that the aircraft moved in rough air that users said didn't feel right. Years of feedback and it is still there. None of these bugs are new bugs. These are problems documented on PMDG's own forum since 2021. Known issues. If you rebuild something from the ground up, the bugs from the old version can't exist in the new one. That is literally what the phrase means. If I told you, for example, that I rebuilt my house from the ground up, and you walk in and you find the same crack in the same wall in the exact same place, you would correctly conclude I did not rebuild my house. So what did they actually do? Did they actually rebuild it from the ground up? I actually looked into it. I went through the JavaScript, the configuration files, the flight model data, comparing the 2020 version side by side with version 4.0.7 for MSFS 24. The main code file in the 2020 version was 77,131 lines long. The main code file for MSFS 24 was 80,063 lines long, rebuilt from the ground up with 3.8% growth. Let me show you what that looks like. This is the handler subscription class. It's essentially the plumbing, the code that lets different parts of the aircraft talk to each other. You flip a switch, and this code is what makes the displays update, the sound trigger, the systems respond. On the left is the 2020 version, and on the right is the 2024 version. Character for character, identical. Not based on, identical. This is the navigation algorithm. When you program your route into the FMC and it draws that magenta line on your display, this is the maths that figures out how to render curves and arcs smoothly without killing your frame rate. The kind of code that takes real expertise to write. Here is the 2020 version, and here is the 2024 version. Exactly the same. The PMDG alert class, what generates pop-up messages on the EFB tablet. This is their code. This is what they have physically written for this product. Exactly the same. Here's the flight model, the aerodynamic data that determines how the aircraft actually flies. The Oswald efficiency factor is identical. The elevator lift coefficient is the same. Over 200 parameters define this flight model, and how many have changed between 2020 and 2024? 5. That is it. That is the rebuilt from the ground up flight model. The same model with 5 tweaks. And this summarizes everything. There's a comment in the flight tuning section of the configuration files, a developer note, and I'm quoting it exactly. Here we tune like amateurs. When you rebuild something completely, you don't preserve the developer's internal jokes. You don't carry over comments typed years ago. Those exist in the new version because the new version is the old version. They didn't rebuild anything. They opened the existing files and made changes. Both versions contain the same commented out dead code that doesn't execute. When you rebuild something from scratch, you don't include dead code from the old version. Why would you? You're starting afresh. Simply put, they ported it. They took the existing product and modified it for the new simulator. And porting is absolutely fine, by the way. That's what most developers do when a new platform comes out. You take your existing work, adapt it, improve what you can. That's reasonable, honest even. But if that's what you're doing, you say that. You say we've significantly updated the aircraft or we've made extensive improvements. You don't say rebuilt from the ground up because that's not what you did, and words have meanings, and your customers are not stupid. And the new code that they did right has its own problems. The EFB, the tablet that you use for SimBrief importing or Navigraph integration or ground services or performance calculators, that all works. It does what it needs to do. It's also really, really slow. Not I'm being picky slow, noticeably, measurably, something is wrong slow. You click a button and there is this pause. And it is because the EFB folder went from 11 megabytes in 2020 to 45 megabytes in 2024, a 309% increase. The 2024 version now supports 4 variants, the 600, 700, 800 and 900. And rather than writing code once and having all of the variants share it, PMDG copied the entire code base 4 times. 4 different folders doing the exact same thing. There's a function called watch brightness changes. It essentially checks whether the tablet screen should be on or off depending on the cockpit lighting. The problem is, it checks every 100 milliseconds, 10 times per second, and it never stops. And that happens twice, by the way. Once on the EFB on the captain's side and once on the first officer's. All of it has code that is bloated and poorly optimized, duplicated across 4 variants rather than shared, with memory leaks that compound over time. And the worst part is, this is new. The 2020 version didn't have any of this. They actually made it worse for $75. And look, I'm not saying that PMDG did nothing. I'm not saying that there are no improvements. There are improvements, some significant, and I've talked about them. I'm saying they made a very specific claim about the nature of the work that they did, used that claim to justify price and defend against criticism, and the claim is demonstrably false. Not arguably false, not depends on the interpretation, demonstrably, verifiably point to the same bugs, false. That matters because trust is the foundation of every transaction. When I give you money for a product, I trust that the description that you have given me bears the same relationship to reality. If that trust is misplaced, if the words you use are just sounds to extract money, then the relationship between us is not a company and a customer. It is a mark and a grifter. But that's the thing about disappointment, isn't it? You can't be disappointed with something you never believed in. Disappointment requires expectation. It needs trust. You have to have looked at something and thought, yes, this is it. This is going to be good. Anger is easy. It's more clean. Something's bad, you're angry and you move on. Disappointment lingers because part of you is still holding on to what you thought it was going to be, what it could have been, what it should have been. And that's the worst part. Parts of it are genuinely good. And those parts keep you hoping, keep you making excuses and saying, yeah, but the system's depth, or yeah, but the flight model, while ignoring everything else. That's what disappointment does. It doesn't let you leave. You build routines in this hobby, little rituals that become part of how you fly. For a lot of us, that includes GSX. You finish your flight, you park at the gate, hover your mouse over the toolbar and click GSX. You watch as the jetway connects and the baggage carts arrive while listening to the sounds of your passengers departing the aircraft. There's a rhythm to it. It's not essential, you could fly without it, but it's yours. Part of the experience you've built for yourself over the years. But PMDG is removing GSX support from all of its products moving forward. According to their 2025 marketing survey, only 14% of their customer base uses GSX. And look, we all know GSX isn't perfect by any means. The phrase, "you've been Umberto'd," exists for a reason. It's what you say when GSX does GSX things. When a baggage cart drives through a terminal building, when the jetway clips through your cabin, you've been Umberto'd. We say it, we laugh, we accept that GSX is GSX and move on with our lives. And yeah, Phoenix has it. Builds has it, FS Labs has it, Aerosoft has it, TFDI has it. Every other developer has figured out how to integrate with this notoriously janky software. Every single one of them has decided that despite GSX being GSX, their customers use it and want it and expect it to work with their aircraft. So why make this decision? If you fly PMDG, you fly PMDG's way. You use their ground handling, their systems, their experience, top to bottom, with no third-party interference. You don't get to customize or to choose. You get what they built, and if you don't like it, well, there's the door. And look, their ground handling isn't bad. It's actually quite good. The Boeing ground handling guide stuff is actually really cool to see. The problem is that PMDG built something most of their customers will never use, then blames the thing that their customers actually use for the incompatibility. That's the pattern. Build something good, fail to integrate with the ecosystem, and then blame the ecosystem. And speaking of patterns, we do need to talk about the EULA.
But first, we will now pause for a brief intermission while the host prepares to potentially get himself sued. That might be a good time to like and subscribe. His legal fees won't pay themselves. Thank you for your patience.
There's a clause in PMDG's end user license agreement right here. PMDG reserves the right to revoke your product authorization for any user who engages in behavior that damages the reputation of PMDG, including but not limited to spreading false information about PMDG or its products. Well, nice knowing you all. I'm off. See you later. Thank you for watching. I'm Spreading false information. Who decides what's false? If I say, for example, that the EFB is laggy and PMDG disagrees with that, is that false? If I show code proving that they didn't rebuild from the ground up, is that false too? PMDG decides. Judge, jury, executioner, and also the company that you're criticizing. Convenient, isn't it? In law, there is this concept termed the chilling effect. The principle itself dates back to 1952 when Justice Frankfurter wrote that vague regulations have, quote, an unmistakable tendency to chill that free play of the spirit. The idea itself is pretty simple. You don't have to punish speech to suppress it. You only have to make people afraid you might. When you don't know where the line is, you don't just avoid crossing it. You stay miles away from it or anything that might have been mistaken for you crossing it. You self-censor. You pull your punches. You say nothing at all. Of course, these types of clauses are largely unenforceable under EU and UK consumer protection law, especially those that target terms like these, which create significant imbalance to the detriment of the consumer. But no one is going to court over $75, and they know that. So the clauses just sit there, legally questionable, practically untested, threatening. Every time someone considers posting criticism, making a video like this, there's that voice. And it's the same pattern. Build something dominant, fail to integrate with criticism, use market position to demand silence instead of earning trust. And silence, as any lawyer will tell you, is often the most powerful form of consent. So, should you buy this thing? If you want a study level 737 for MSFS 24, you don't really have a choice. PMDG is it, and the product is, in many ways, genuinely good. Procedural accuracy verified by actual pilots. The system's depth is real, sounds are pretty good, and you can buy the Boris sound pack and get even better sounds. If that's what you care about most, you'll probably be satisfied. But what you should know is what you're also getting. If you're a new customer, $75 is a lot. For that price, you deserve excellence throughout, not just in the areas that sell. You deserve round wheels, cabin announcements, full GSX integration, working circuit breakers, textures that don't need community fixes. You won't get all of that. If you're an existing customer considering this $30 upgrade, you're paying for improvements, not a complete rebuild. It is a port, that is fine, but that's not what they told you. I started by asking what happens when the only company that makes a thing gets to define what that thing is. And here's the answer. They learned that words don't have consequences. PMDG's monopoly isn't permanent. It's a position they hold because they held it before, because they built a reputation on work that used to justify it. But reputation doesn't last forever when behavior stops earning it. The ceiling is where it is because we accepted it, but ceilings move. That moment before the engines start, when everything is possible, it is still there. The promise of learning something real, that's still worth chasing. I just wish I didn't have to chase it from a company that thinks rebuilt from the ground up means we changed 5 parameters and kept the same bugs. That's not study level, but it's all we've got.